I think that we're going to have to come to the elephant in the room here at this point. Tell me how you perceive the Trump administration. What were some of its successes, some of its failures? What work is left undone? But before you do that, tell me how you came to change your perspective on Donald Trump. A litmus
Yeah,
test. Oh, let me just set this up a little bit more. I am not interested in a litmus test of did you support the guy in 2016 or whatever, because I have written a book called Democrat to Deplorable. I understand about political transformations, which was very heavily influenced by Hillbilly Elegy, by the way. Love your writing style. So clean and
great to hear.
crisp.
Thank you.
So clean and crisp. I really enjoyed it. Uh, and so a litmus test like that is not useful for me. But there are definitely people in my audience and people in my network and people that you know that
Sure.
also are curious. Like, how can we please explain your mental thought process that went from, if I understand correctly, advocating for Hillary Clinton, not supporting Donald Trump, being actively anti Donald Trump. How did this change happen to where you voted for him or supported for him in 2020 and would support him in 2024 now? What do you think? What do you say? Please help us understand.
Yeah, yeah. So just to clarify, was not a Hillary Clinton person. I did a write-in 2016. I
Gotcha.
was, stupid to do that. I certainly should have voted for Trump in 2016. But like recognize, especially after the deplorables comment, like how dangerous of a person Hillary Clinton was, and I think what she represented was really disgusting. I think it's sort of the worst of this, like creating a second class tier of citizens among our own country. I really didn't like Hillary Clinton, but yeah, look, I was wrong about Trump. And I think that what did Trump do or what changed your mind about Trump? I think it's this is such a complicated and long conversation that we could have, but I really don't think it was primarily about Trump, right? So there were these policy wins. There were things that he did that I really liked. I really liked the China policy. I really liked that he went after their manufacturing theft against the American worker. I really like that just rhetorically he changed the conversation on China in a way that even Joe Biden is picking up on some of Trump's themes, even if unfortunately I don't think he's going to replicate the policy successes. He's at least picking up on Trump's rhetoric. Um, you know, like I really liked I really liked the immigration policy. I liked the fact that we actually had control of the southern border, that we were starting to have a real conversation about what do we do with our legal immigration system, which I think is broken just as our illegal immigration system is. So there were these policy victories where I was happy about. Like I didn't really think that he'd deliver on these things, and he actually did deliver on these things, and that was meaningful and important. But really, it was about like I saw and realized something about the American elite and about my role in the American elite that took me just a while to figure out, right? And I was red pilled, and frankly, there are a lot of people I think who see what I said in 2016 and say, well, fundamentally, this guy, we don't trust him, right? And frankly, if I was in their shoes, it would take me a little bit to trust JD Vance as well. But if I'm trying to explain this, so the personal biography here is I came from more or less nothing, right? I came from a working class family. Nobody in my family had gone to college. I get to Yale Law School. I write this best selling book. I have my own like, business that's doing very well. And I'm like all of a sudden have been dunked into this elite world in a way that I never even fully realized, right? And I think that a lot of the influences of that elite world were making me basically a less happy person, but were also making me not as mindful about how broken our elite culture was, right? Because they bring you into this world, they have you at their Sun Valley conference, which people call billionaires boot camp, and they have you do these speeches in front of all these chief executives. And it feels really good to be included in these circles, and you start to lose sight of where you came from and who you were. And I think that really is something that started to happen to me. And thank God, by the grace of God or by luck, I started to realize that was happening, and I started to just push back against it in a very explicit and public way. And this is, one thing I'll say is that, like, it's not like I said I voted for Donald Trump 2 weeks before I decided to run for Senate. Like I've been very open about the fact that I've had a sort of transformation in how I think about the American elite and that elite's reputation and its relationship to Trump. I was going on Tucker Carlson 3 years ago talking about how Republican elites leadership hated their own voters. Like this was something I've been talking about and thinking about for a few years now. Like, let me give you just one crazy story. So we did this event, my wife and I, dinner with a lot of these like, very fancy, very wealthy people, and we were seated next to the CEO of one of the largest hotel chains in the world. And this guy was just like full on monopoly man evil, complaining about how Donald Trump's immigration policies were forcing him to raise the wages of his workers. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Explain this to me a little bit. And he said, well, look, I work in the hotel business. When I need workers, I can just go to the southern border and import a lot of low wage foreigners into my hotel chain. They'll work their butts off under the table for $8 an hour. But if I've got to pay American workers, they want $16 an hour. They want $18 an hour. They want $20 an hour. And it made me realize that like all of this garbage about immigration and Trump's immigration rhetoric. It was about a hotel CEO not wanting to pay his workers more money. And I knew that. Like I've been an immigration hawk for a while now. I've talked about how immigration depresses the wages of the American worker. But when you see it before your eyes that these people hate Donald Trump because he is trying to make them pay higher wages to Americans, it's like, oh my God, like I don't want to be part of this crew. Like I don't want to be involved in this. I'll make a lot of money. I'll earn a lot of accolades. I'll never have a hard minute. I'll never have the mainstream media calling me morally depraved, which is what they call me today. But at the end of the day, I'll be a terrible person who turns his back on where he came from. And I just slowly realized, look, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy who teams up with the hotel chain CEO to depress the wages of American workers. I'd like to maybe play a role in saving this country that I love so much. And so really, again, as much as I think Trump had a lot of policy achievements that surprised me, a lot of it was just realizing how corrupt the establishment is in this country and how much I was being recruited into that establishment. And I didn't want that.
Well, I appreciate that answer. That sounds authentic to me. There's going to be time and place for you to reconfirm that for other people. Plenty coming up, I can imagine. And again, like I said, I've literally written a book on political transformations, and I understand that as more evidence comes up and your life experience changes, it's okay to change your position. You supported Trump in 2020, you support him in 2024. I don't know that he's even the greatest president that we could have. I don't know that he's the best guy that we could have. I do know that I voted for him very clearly in 16 and 20 and supported him and thought he was the best choice at that time. And he's perhaps the best choice at this time. But there are other leadership positions which have a lot of influence in what happens in the United States. Mitch McConnell, should he retain his leadership position? If not, who should replace him?
Look, I have no idea who should be the majority leader of the Senate. I think that McConnell has clearly shown that he's a little, sometimes a little out of touch with where the base is. And I worry a great deal about having a Republican leadership that's been in power for effectively 40 years and is really, really disconnected from where the base is. I have actually, it's an interesting question. I have no idea how even the leadership election works. Is it the sort of thing where like, do you need 50 plus one to get a majority leader, or is it just a majority within the Republican caucus, which hopefully, would mean 27 or 28 votes. So I have no idea how that election even works. But look, I think that it's time that we moved beyond the very old leadership class that's dominated the Republican Party for a long time. And I think it's just we got to do it. We got to bring some new blood in. We got to get people that the base is actually excited about, because the thing that I really worry about is I do a lot of events out there. Most days I'm on the road talking to voters in Ohio. And by the way, if you want to support the campaign, jdvance.com, you can sign up for our email list and support us otherwise. But one of the things that really worries me is between the election integrity issues of 2020 and just the current leadership of the party. And also, I think the fact that Trump is booted off of social media. There's a real depression that exists in our population and among our people. I can get people to come out to our speeches and they're excited and they're engaged, but there's also just, like, our people are still in mourning in a certain way. And we got to get something that gets folks excited and engaged about 2022 and then 2024. And I don't think it's possible to do that with the same leadership that we've had in this country. The other thing it's interesting is that, you asked sort of what went right about the Trump administration, what went wrong about the Trump administration. I mean, the one thing that is just very clearly a problem is what we were talking about earlier. which is that too many of the actual bureaucrats who would turn Trump's instincts and policy preferences into actual policy for the American people, there's a massive breakdown there. And we saw that from 2016 to 2020. Like Republican elites, some of our biggest think tanks, I mean, conservative think tanks supported by conservative donors that are supposed to turn ideas into policy, a lot of the fellows, a lot of the leaders of these institutions don't like the voters who make the Republican Party as viable as it is. Like we've got to change that. I think up and down the movement, we need some new leadership. Absolutely.
Who would you caucus with in the Senate? Who do you see as an ally? Who's somebody that you can work with?
Yeah, you know, Josh Hawley just endorsed me a couple of days ago. Josh and I have become pretty good friends, and I think you know he's very thoughtful about not just like the big tech issue, which I care a lot about. You know, he's got some interesting thoughts about how to become a senator in D.C. without losing your soul. And as somebody who's seen how corrupting the American elite can be from the inside, I think he has some good ideas for how to avoid that. You know, I like Rand Paul a lot. I think especially on some of his foreign policy ideas, he's got some interesting thoughts. I like Tom Cotton, like Ted Cruz. You know, there are a few people there. I think we've got a pretty good core group of senators, but we need to get that core group to like 15 or 20 before we can really, I think, start making waves in this party.
Yeah, I think that's about right.